Hello, hello. I am Jazmin Kylene, and welcome to another episode of From Soul to Song. Today we have rising R&B singer and songwriter all the way from the Philippines, who's coming off of the release of her brand new EP, Up to You. Welcome, welcome, Tiana Kocher. How you feeling?
I am feeling amazing. Thank you for having me. Excited to chat.
Yes, of course. And I would love to segue immediately with what we were just talking about before, which is like getting your name pronounced correctly, and that kind of being something that I think anybody that is from any sort of like foreign country has to deal with. And so I'd love to know, being from the Philippines and coming from the Philippines, how has that shaped and informed your artistry? Because there isn't a lot of like R&B representation there, is there?
Um, well, hmm. It's a little interesting. The Philippines, I want to say there's starting to become room for R&B. Like there's, you like it's making its waves out there, but there's this thing called OPM, which is what they call original Filipino music, and that is still what's very popular, which is a very pop sound, lots of ballads, like lots of big voices. So that's what people tend to gravitate to. But, with Gen Z on the come up and them, wanting to kind of take over the world, there is that, market now, I guess you could say, for R&B.
Beautiful. And when you
Yeah.
were, because I understand you were born there, but you spent some time growing up in London. Is that true? Or
So I was born and raised in the Philippines. I lived there till I was about 17, and then I moved to the UK. I lived there for a little over 2 years.
wow.
I went to school. Yeah, I went to school out there. I have a degree in musical theater.
Yes,
That
Queen.
that is what I did out there. And yeah, I mean, my dad, he's from San Diego. So I grew up coming to California a lot, which is where I call home now. And just, very grateful that my parents were able to expose me to a lot of different cultures growing up, traveling, all throughout Asia and all throughout the United States. And I also went to an international school, which is why I sound like this. I
Mm.
don't have the strongest accent. But yeah, I was always just around so many different cultures, and I think that definitely did play a very big part in my music, I guess.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. You can just feel the versatility and the way that you've been so warm to different cultures. And I'd love to know, especially, those 17 years where you were growing up there, who were the female artists that you were watching, that you were emulating, that were kind of giving you permission to pursue this?
My both my parents love music, and their music taste is very different from one another. My mom loves R&B and pop, and my dad is a very big jazz, blues, and rock kind of guy.
Mm.
But anytime I'd be in a car, it would always be my mom playing the music. And so she'd always be playing like Keisha Cole, SWV, Tamia, Aaliyah. And so that's what I naturally like gravitated to.
Nice, beautiful. And I'm glad that you were sort of like, yeah, you were peppered with that appreciation. I just thought Keisha Cole like just performed at the VMAs, and I was like, do people even realize how iconic this
Yes.
is?
And the mic was on. Like
On.
she sounded and looked incredible. I thought like her 1 minute performance was the best performance of the entire night.
Girl, I was locked in and I was like, let her sing Love next. Like I was like give her this moment. So
Right.
good.
Diddy can leave. Let's keep Keisha on stage.
Oh my God. And it's so dope because I feel like you are playing that role now for this new generation that is sort of like coming into this new age of R&B. And B. And it's beautiful because you've done such significant work. I know you're behind women's writing camps. And so I'd love to know, especially with, being a woman in the industry, how do you think that the industry needs to be better when it comes to, yeah, facilitating and nurturing and cultivating women's voices?
How much time do you have? Because
Plenty of time.
I
Yes.
can I can go on and on about that. One of the reasons why I really wanted to have or put together an all women's writing camp is because it people don't realize it, but it is such a male dominated industry. Like when it comes to being in the studio, at least, like, it's always a male producer, it's always a male engineer, and most of the time, like, all these male producers will bring in male writers, and I'm like, well, how can we write about something that you're probably not going to understand?
Right.
Like I'm like, I look at things very differently than a man, and that's just us women. We have a different perspective on life. And so I really wanted to create a safe space for women to create. And one of the things that all these girls said afterwards was like, I've never been in a session where it's all female.
Imagine that.
Which is shocking to me. I'm like,
Imagine that.
okay, well, same, but like it's crazy. It's
Right.
crazy that that is the norm. Well, at least in LA, I haven't really sessioned anywhere else in the world, but especially in LA, it's just all men. And
Right.
I just don't want that to be the norm anymore. And I want people to know that there are really talented female engineers and really talented female producers and writers and other artists, that I want people to like realize that there's more out there. There's more of us in the world. But it is tough being a woman in a very male dominated industry. And I'm gonna do whatever I can to make sure that we get our props as well. And I want to say we are.
Oh my God. It's such important work that you're doing beyond the art. It really, really, really is. And I think that I think anyone can take nectar from that, and whatever industry, whatever sort of ecosystem that they find themselves in, being the lesser voice. And so I'd love to know, just outside of that, how have you worked on like reclaiming your voice and saying your no's and like demanding your needs? Has that always been natural for you?
When I first moved to LA, I was under very different management. I didn't really know better, which is why I was kind of like saying yes to everything, because I thought I was going to do the musical thing my whole life. I never really wanted to. Well, it's not that I never wanted to. I never really had the guts, I guess you could say, to pursue music full-fledged, just because I was always so shy, which is probably, you're probably like, "What? You're shy?"
Right.
I am. Like, when people initially meet me, like, I am very introverted.
Mm.
And so when I first moved to LA, was in like a management deal, and I had a distro deal with like this company, and I was basically a puppet. So
Mm.
a lot of my early releases, I didn't write. I had no say in what I could wear. I had no say in what I could look like. I was a puppet. And so it did take a lot for me to break out of my shell. I want to say the pandemic was actually such a blessing for me, because I was able to really take a step back and recalibrate, because at that point I just got out of the deal. I changed my entire team, and I was also just very much so on my own. So I did a lot of experimenting and finding myself during the pandemic. And so, yeah, that's really what happened. A lot of finding my voice again, and actually writing music. So anything post like 2020 is like all written by me. Anything prior to that was not. Um, but it did take a lot. It did take a lot, but I do think that it is all worth it. You're still here, and I do genuinely have such a deep love for music and creating a community. So I always look back at, why I started in the first place, and that always brings me back down to, okay, keep going.
Of course, yeah, and that tribulation I think really makes the triumph all the more delicious. Like to know that you kind of earned your sovereignty and you earned your voice. And I think with this EP, you can really like you can feel how true these stories are to you, and the fact that you really are speaking from an inward place and from a experienced place. And so having it out in the world and kind of hearing people sing back to you your stories, how does it feel? Is it weird to be that vulnerable, or how are you standing in it?
It is weird. And then I also remind myself that, as a consumer myself, prior to making my own music, I would always gravitate to music that I could relate to.
Yeah.
So, the reason why I tell myself I have no issue with releasing music now is because I know someone out there can relate to this, and
Yeah.
Lord knows, what they're going through, and if they needed, words of encouragement, or if they needed just validation that, oh, someone else is, going through this, so I do what I do.
Yeah, I have the same. I think I feel like music shifted for me so much right after I experienced heartbreak for the first time because I was like, oh, I get it now. And like I can really finally make a home in these songs because I can mirror back what they're saying. And I feel like your work is really giving so many people, and in particular women, that opportunity to see themselves in it. And I think it's so cool that you collaborated with Bobby V, especially because like I would love to know, especially like with that kind of full circle moment, because I'm assuming, like Slow Down must have played a role in your like iPod at some point. Tell me about that.
Okay, so the way that actually got like happened is kind of crazy. So initially, it was just me. Like I have a version of the song where it was just like me, like the whole thing. But I went into a session with a producer and was like, "Oh, what have you been working on?" And I played that song just like to get the vibes. And he was like, "Oh, has Bobby heard that?" And I was like, "No, like no." And he was like, "Oh, well, can you send it to me? I want to play it to him." And then from there, he was like, "Oh, I want to jump on the record." So that is literally how it happened. It was very crazy. It's a very full circle moment for me. Obviously, listened to Bobby so much as a kid, and it's a very iconic song. And to be able to sample that, and have the actual artist on it is like kind of crazy. And I'm very blessed. But it came together so seamlessly. He was so excited to do it, and he sounds amazing on it.
It's so good because it's like it honors the original, but it also is something so brand new at the same time, and people love it.
Yeah,
I think it's
for
it's
sure.
yeah, it's a whole new experience, but it really does pay homage to like our childhoods and how that song I think really embodied like a specific era of R&B that was just so
Yes,
like
yes.
free and easy. And I'd love
Feel
to know what's your
good.
perspective. And I ask this question all the time, but like, what's your perspective on how R&B has changed over time and where it is now?
Um, well, I think in terms of like lyrics, it's changed a lot. And I think that also just comes with the generations and how it's very, and just societal norms. Like it's a lot of things are very surface level now. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very hard to listen to things without basically visualizing a deeper meaning. I feel like a lot of songs lyrically are still very like surface, and there's not too much storytelling.
Right.
There are a few artists out there that do put the storytelling and the visuals first, but I think when it comes to like sonically the way things sound, I think R&B is coming back. You know what I mean? I do believe that like that feel good music is coming back, but I do wish people put more attention to their lyrics.
Mm, yeah, I agree. I agree. I think yeah, I think wherever we land with a genre and its shape shifting is always going to be representative of like the generation that's sort of producing it in that moment. I do think yeah, it really is obvious overall what we value right now and what we want to be speaking about. But yeah, and I know I read and I read that you mentioned that Love You More was like your mom's favorite song, and I'd love to know because I thought that's just like the most adorable anecdote, and I'd love to know what role does your parents and support play in your work.
Yeah, so Love You More was actually written and recorded back in 2017.
I love
So
that.
that song is about 6 years old. But she's always like ever since I recorded it for the first time, she's always been like, "When are you releasing that song? When are you releasing that song?" And I just thought it fit perfectly with the collection of songs that I wanted to release anyway. So I just added it. I had it remastered and all that, obviously to keep up with the times because, you know, it did sound very different, but you know, my parents have always been very supportive. And I do, you know, take into account like the things that they say, you know, because they are music lovers. So I ask them like, hey, do you like this? You know, is there anything that you think I should change? Like, because I do value their
Mm.
opinion a lot just because of how supportive they always have been. Because I'm the only child that is doing music. So, you know, I know it, they really support what I do. So the least I can do is to listen, and I do appreciate everything they have to say.
Oh, that's beautiful. Especially, I think, yeah, any
Yeah.
child that takes a creative route, you're always like, all right, like, are you like, is it still cool with you? Like, are you still feeling it? So I totally get
Yep.
it and I agree.
Yeah. And
And
I mean, I love my parents. I do. So
yeah,
anything I can do to make them happy, I will.
mood. I love that. I love that. And I'd
Hmm.
love to know before I even get to this last question, what do you think, especially because that is a song that is just so drenched in love, what do you think is the best love song of all time?
Best love song of all time. Off the top of my head, I'm gonna have to go officially Missing You by Tamia.
Girl, girl. Like
It's
that
a good one.
song is
It's a
just
good one.
it's so, and you know what? I've asked that question so many times, no one's ever mentioned it, but like I have such a specific and personal relationship with that song. It's so good. It's so good. Shout out
Hmm.
to Tamia. Where is she these days?
I know she ended up marrying like a basketball player. They had a kid. I know,
Go off.
honestly, I know she's still touring because she went to Manila a few years ago, and my mom was like, "I'm watching Tamia." But what's super crazy is that when I lived in the UK, and my like music teacher or the head of the program like had like a one-on-one meeting with all the students and was just like, where's your head at, like what do you want to do in life? And I was just like, you know, like music, like I love music, but I do love theater. So I was like, you know, kind of just talking about that, and she asked me like who my influences were, and I was like, oh, you know, Aaliyah, SWV, whatever, whatever. And I said Tamia, and she was like, oh, I know Tamia, I played in her band in college.
I
I
can't
was
even
like,
emotionally handle that. That's beyond me. Beyond.
I literally was like, what? What? I, the world is so crazy tiny.
I
And I was
know.
just
And
like,
like
oh,
little synchronicities like that though, I feel like are really just indicative of like I'm on the right path. I'm in the right rooms, I'm around the right people, you know?
that's, yeah, listen, I'm like a very religious and spiritual kind of gal. And so I like overanalyze everything, and I'm like, okay, like I was meant to hear that. We were meant to have this conversation because Lord knows where I'll be, you know? So,
Yeah, no, honey,
yeah.
everything is a sign. Everything is a sign. So I love it. And I,
Everything is a sign.
yeah, totally. Me. And I think it's a testament because I think you're just standing in such a surreal place in your career. People are really fucking with your music and your sound. And it's because, like you said, you've worked at honing an environment and ecosystem that's true to you, true to your voice, true to your stories, and thus uplifting the women that want to tell their stories or see themselves in your stories. And so, before we close this out, is there any last things that you want to say about, you know, your project being out, this next phase of your career?
Ooh, I mean, I have more music, you know. It's one of those things, and I am very excited for this next chapter. You know, I did hit a little bit of a hump where it's like, do I still want to keep doing this? And I feel like every artist goes through that, but we're out of it, thank God. But I am ready because I do look at, you know, projects as kind of chapters, and I am ready to move on to the next chapter. And you know, as I keep getting older, I want to say my music keeps getting more mature, and I also want my listeners and my audience to grow with me. And so I am excited for this next era. And yeah, stay tuned.
Totally. Oh, we're so excited. I can't imagine. I think as you, especially as someone who seems so grounded and so intentional with their words, with their work, I can't imagine how much your work is going to evolve with you. So thank you so much for sharing your voice and yourself with Soul Era and the community. We value you. We value R&B. And yeah, we hope to see you soon. We can't wait for what's next.